Hey guys, welcome to another Travel Therapy Mentor live video. I'm Jared Kazaza. If you guys are just tuning in for the first time to one of these videos, and I write articles for the website Fifth Wheel PT and Travel Therapy Mentor. And normally we do these live videos every week. I think we're somewhere around 40 videos now that we've done weekly. And it's usually Whitney and I both, but this week Whitney is actually in Memphis. If you guys have been watching our Instagram, she's been in Memphis with her mom for her mom's birthday. So this is the first video I'm doing on my own, but we'll get outside of my comfort zone a little bit and see how it goes. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about our interview we did with Joe Smith from Travel Tax. We drove down there on Tuesday, and it was about a 5-hour drive from Roanoke down to Greenville, South Carolina, and got to ask him a bunch of questions. It was a really good time, and we really enjoyed being able to get down there, and we got a bunch of questions from you guys, which was great, on both Instagram and Facebook. Hey Caroline, thanks for joining. So Joe Smith from Travel Tax that we interviewed, he is a tax professional. What I really like about him is that not only is he a tax professional, but he's also a former traveler. So he traveled for a few years, and so he's got a very good insight, not only on the tax side of things, but also on the travel side of things. So he's really like the go-to guy in terms of taxes in our industry. And I have heavily relied on his site over the years. I can remember reading articles on his site 5 years ago when I first started researching travel. So he's been around a long time, and he actually started his business almost 20 years ago now. He said 2001. So it's been quite a while. So he's got a lot of experience. He's a former traveler, and he's a tax professional. So it's somebody that I definitely looked to for advice, and it was awesome being able to go down there and meet him and record a video. So I'm going to post that live, the video that we actually did, that we recorded with him, the interview. I'll post that probably in the description of this video once it's over, and I'll post in the comments as well. But first I want to talk about, so I'm going to get into the main topics that we talked about in the interview and talk about some of the takeaways that I got from the interview. But first I want to talk about some announcements, some stuff coming up for us. By the way, I think there's 10 people in here now. If you guys could drop a comment, just let me know who you are, who's watching. I see Caroline, but I don't know who all else is in here. Let me know if you're a current traveler or a student. That'd be awesome. So the announcements. Well, I think it's Wednesday. What is today? Sunday. So Wednesday, I think we fly out to Albuquerque for National Student Conclave. We're going to be talking there about travel therapy and about finances. We're doing a presentation there. So I'm really nervous about that. Hopefully it goes well. And if any of you guys are going to be there, let me know. Or let us know. We'd love to meet up with you guys, or if you guys can make it to our presentation, that would be really cool. We will probably do a sponsored happy hour in Albuquerque while we're there. So keep an eye out for that if you're in the area. If you guys want to come and meet up with us, talk about travel therapy, probably have some free drinks. It should be a lot of fun. In 2 weeks, we mentioned this last week, we're going to be moving to, 2 weekends from now, we're going to be moving to Goldsboro, North Carolina. Whitney accepted a job there. She's going to be working at an outpatient clinic. That sounds really great. I'm gonna probably, I'll still look for a job in the area. I might look for PRN, but I'm mostly gonna be working on the websites, Fifth Wheel PT and this website, Travel Therapy Mentor, writing articles, marketing, trying to get into making more videos like this. Hopefully, we're actually thinking about doing a course or two, so we'll see. I'll hopefully come up with some ideas when I've got a lot of free time while she's working. So while we're down in that area, that's very close to Raleigh, North Carolina. So we're thinking about doing a meetup probably in the next couple weeks in Raleigh. If there's enough travelers in the area that are interested in coming out, and we could probably get that sponsored again. At least a drink or two for free would be really cool. So if you guys are in that area, let us know, and we'd definitely like to meet up. We definitely want to explore that area on the weekends. We'll probably take a couple weekend trips into Raleigh and surrounding areas. So, all right, on to the topic. I'm just going to talk about a recap of what we talked about and the main takeaways from it. You guys that are in here, if you could like, comment, share this video so more people see it. The more informed travelers we have, especially about things regarding taxes, the better, because this is an area that is, I guess it's very there's a lot of hearsay, a lot of rumors that spread around about how taxes work for travelers, and there's not a lot of concrete answers. And so I think having a interview like that with Joe and having him answer questions is probably the most concrete we're going to get with tax advice. So the more people that can see this, the better. So the main things we talked about. Hey Daniel, thanks for joining. Hey Ryan. Main things we talked about were tax home rules. That was probably the most common question that we got. Like I said, I think we got about 30 questions between Facebook and Instagram. We answered some of them, like the ones that we actually knew the answer to. We answered them already. We tried to integrate every question we got into the interview with him. So hopefully, if you guys sent us a question, check out the video, and hopefully he gave you some pretty good insight on that. So tax home rules, things like how to establish a tax home, how to maintain a tax home. Those are very, very common questions for travelers. What even is a tax home? Do you have to have a tax home? We talked about all that stuff. We also talked about filing taxes as a traveler. That's something that we get a lot of questions about too. Things like, what do you need to keep? What kind of records do you need to keep? What kind of things do you need to take to your tax professional? We got a lot of questions about that. And I asked him, we didn't get this question, but I was very interested. Since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act went into effect last year, I asked him how many people actually itemize now. And it turns out there's not that many people that itemize. And the big reason for that is because work-related expenses are no longer tax deductible. So that was interesting. A lot of people are just taking the standard deduction now, which I've actually taken the standard deduction at Whitney as well every year that we've traveled. So it didn't change for us, but I know a lot of other travelers were itemizing. So that was a kind of a big change for them. And I'm sure that was a big change for travel tax in general. We talked about tax rates, talked about basically tax and then tax pay. Like what is a reasonable tax rate for different disciplines, PTs, OTs, SLPs, assistants. What is a reasonable tax rate? Because that's something that we get a lot of questions about. Some companies want to pay really low. Some companies insist on paying a pretty high tax rate. And obviously that's two sides of the same pie. The higher the tax rate, the lower the stipends are going to be. So people want to take the lowest tax rate possible to maximize their stipends, but is there any tax implications with that? So we asked about that. I thought that was he had a pretty good answer there. Hey Michael, thanks for joining, current traveler. We talked about IRS audit likelihood. So this was something I was also very interested in. Ask him like, how common is it for travelers to get audited? How often do you see that? And somebody with almost 20 years in the industry working with a bunch of different travelers, he definitely has the most insight there. And going into the interview, I did some research about just general audit rates. And what I found is it's probably between somewhere 1% and 2% is your risk of getting audited as a general population, just a regular W-2 employee. And his answer, I kind of expected it. He said that working in the travel industry increases your risk of being audited. And that makes sense because we get tax-free stipends. These travel companies sometimes are under being watched or under investigation by the IRS, I guess. So all their travelers working with them might be reviewed or, obviously at higher risk. So a little bit higher risk for travelers, and that was pretty interesting. And then we talked about specific scenarios that we get. So we have a lot of people that are interested in traveling that reach out to us, and they have these very specific scenarios. And obviously, we can't cover every scenario, but there were some common themes that we asked about, and it was things like new grads. So say you were away for college or away for grad school, and then you wanted to come back home and use your hometown or even your parents' house as your tax home, and then you wanted to travel away from there. Is that possible, and how would you go about it? That's a very, very common thing that we get asked about. We also had questions about living with family. So if you want to use your family's house as a tax home, how would you go about setting up a contract? What kind of documents would you need? So I thought that was probably going to be helpful for a lot of you guys. Another question we get a lot is renting your tax home out. So a lot of people want to, especially people with families, they might have a house that they're leaving, and they don't want to just leave their house empty. One, because it's expensive, and two, because no one's watching it. So they want to rent it out. And so we asked him about how that would work. If you're able to do that, if it has to be a short-term rental, or if you have to save a room for yourself. Like there's a lot of rumors about that, I would say. Like I said, a lot of hearsay between travelers, but it was nice to get his input on that. Hey Tara, hey Nicole, thanks for joining. And then we get questions about military spouses. We've gotten a few of those over the last year or so. And how would it work with a military spouse traveling like to the new assignment location with their spouse in the military? Like, how would that work if you want to be a traveler? Hey Jeff, thanks for joining. And then another big question we get is, how do you go about changing your tax home, either in the same location or in a different location? Some people want to just, they say they've been working at a permanent job and they want to change their tax home to their hometown so that they can use that as their home base. And so that's a very common situation for people that don't travel as new grads. They want to move back to their hometown, rent a room, and then travel from there. So we asked his input on that. So I think we hit a lot of important topics there, and I think it'll be a lot of good insight for you guys. If you guys watching right now, if you have any questions or comments about travel, about taxes, let me know. If you could like this video, that'd be awesome. And then I'm going to get into some of the takeaways that I got from this, from our interview. So the first thing that was really awesome is I sent Joe a message, I guess it was kind of a selfish message, because I kind of wanted some insight on our own taxes. I wanted insight on this business that we have now, like deductions for that. So I was just like, hey, would you mind us coming down there and asking you some questions about our own taxes? And I was like, and while we're down there, it would be great if we could film a video with you. And I've communicated with him on Facebook, but I've never had any kind of real interaction with him. So I didn't know how he would take that. But it turns out he's an extremely nice guy, very personable, very willing to help. And he was awesome to us. So I would highly recommend, if you don't know, if you're very skeptical or hesitant about filing your own taxes, we've always done our own. But if you're skeptical about doing your own, or you don't want to take all the time to research, because I spent a ton of time researching our own taxes, probably more time than it was worth. If it probably would have been better for us to just pay out of pocket. But if you don't want to do that, it's definitely worth the price to have someone, especially someone experienced like Joe and his team there, to do it for you. And they also offer phone consultations. So like I said, we had all those scenarios, but there are some very specific situations that each person has. So you might watch our video, or you might go to his website and read the frequently asked questions, but that doesn't mean that those things always apply to you. So he'll do phone consultations where he'll talk to you and give you some advice, and if you want to work with them afterwards, then that's great. But they're awesome people. The whole team was great. Joe's a really nice guy. So that was the first takeaway. Second is that very little in the travel world and in the tax world is black and white. And that's not only in the travel world, it's kind of taxes in general, but it's even more so with travel taxes, because our industry is just very unique, I would say, in that most people traveling away from home aren't going to be gone so long. Most people are like pilots or government workers, and they're just going to be gone for a few days. And then things are pretty straightforward with that. You get a meal stipend, you get housing. Obviously, you're coming back home when you come back. But for us, things are a lot more gray. Things like, how long can you spend in an area before you have to leave? It's very gray. I mean, there's some basic guidelines, but that's about it. There's kind of like a low end and a high end, and you probably want to be safe, and we covered that in the video. But it's a lot of gray area for almost everything in terms of taxes. So it's one of those things where if you have a professional guiding you through, I think it makes you feel a lot more confident, because I know that over the years I have stressed about things like, what if I'm doing something wrong, or what if I'm completely missing like some deductions that would be very good for us. So if I could go back now, I probably would have worked with a professional from the beginning. A big thing that kept coming up is to always keep very careful records. So keeping copies of your leases, both of your tax home and your travel assignment, keeping copies of your contracts, keeping record of everything, and always having a paper trail. So things like the lease for your tax home, but also proof that you paid rent to the tax home, and proof that you paid rent to the area that you're living on assignment. Those things are really important. And not only to just keep short term, but Joe recommends to keep those up to 3 years or sometimes even longer. So always be very careful, keep a good paper trail. We have done a decent job of that, but I think we could have done a lot better if we were starting over, knowing what we know now. We probably would have been a little more careful, keeping track of everything that we did. And then another thing that I kind of came out of this with was, even though the audit risk is pretty low, it is higher for us as travelers, and it's always better safe than sorry. So make sure that you dot your I's and cross your T's, so to speak. Make sure that you're really following the tax home rules, that you're going back home at least 30 days, all those things that we've talked about before and that Joe writes about on his website. All that stuff is really important. Make sure that you're doing all that, because if you do get audited, it would be terrible to have to not only pay back taxes on stipends that you received, but also pay penalties on that. That would be it would be a life-changing thing. So make sure that you're really careful about all that stuff. I would much rather be safe than sorry, be overly cautious than and we all hear stories about people that travel for years, never have a tax home, never get audited. It's no big deal, but you never know what your situation is going to be like. You never know if you're going to be one of the lucky ones or you're going to be one of the unlucky ones. So just be extra cautious, I would say. One other thing that was a big takeaway for me is that, and actually we saw this a lot in the questions that we got from you guys on Instagram and on Facebook. Recruiters will tell you one thing, and the recruiter is not a tax expert. So sometimes travelers rely on their recruiters too much, and sometimes the recruiters don't give good information in terms of taxes. We heard from a few people that the recruiter told them that they didn't actually need to pay any rent for a tax home, they just needed to have an address. As long as they were receiving mail there, they would be fine. And that is clearly not true. And if you get audited, you have no ground to stand on there. You're gonna be in trouble with that. So don't rely on your recruiter, and make sure that you're working with a good recruiter. There's a lot of new recruiters that they try their best, but if you're new in the industry, it took us a couple years to really understand everything and to have a good insight about taxes in general. So a brand new recruiter, they're learning their job. They're not learning the IRS rules, and they're not learning all that stuff. So don't take a recruiter's word for it, and make sure you're working with a good recruiter. And if you guys need advice or recommendations on recruiters, always feel free to reach out to us. We've talked to at least a couple dozen since we started traveling, and we found some really good ones and some ones that we also did not really like that much. So hopefully we would be able to help you guys out if you need some recommendations. So those are the main things. I think those are the main takeaways, the main points. What kind of questions do you guys have? Do you have any questions? Whoever's still in here, 12 people in here right now. So if you guys have any questions for me or about travel, I'm going to get into, actually we had one Facebook question that came in today when we announced that I was going to be doing this live video, and that was, what receipts would you keep for taxes, for tax purposes? So the example she gave was like, do you need gas receipts, you need oil change, car maintenance, that kind of stuff? And the answer there is, it depends. Like anybody in the therapy world knows, almost every answer starts with it depends. It depends on if you're going to itemize or if you're going to take the standard deduction, because almost everybody is going to be taking the standard deduction. And it also depends on if you're an independent contractor or you're working through a travel company. Because if you're an independent contractor, you can still write off some of those work-related expenses. But if you're a W-2 employee through a travel company, you can't write off those work-related expenses. And things like gas, if you're a home health therapist, or gas to drive to and from a travel assignment, those are work-related expenses that you're not going to be reimbursed for, or you're not going to be able to write that off on your taxes. So really it depends. Most likely you don't need to keep track of those things, because you're probably going to be working through a travel company and you're probably going to be taking the standard deduction, in which case almost none of those things like car expenses or hotel expenses, like driving from one assignment to another, almost none of that is going to matter. So you probably don't need to keep those receipts. So Carolyn asked, how would the IRS even know that you're a traveler based on who you work for? So what Joe said about that is, it's based on who you work for. They can also, he was saying that if they were going to investigate a travel company, they would see that you worked for, they could basically pull charts from that travel company and look at their travelers and look at their income, and then basically they would take their total salary for the year on their tax return, divide that by how many weeks the traveler likely worked, and then they can come out with what's your hourly pay. Or, I mean, I'm sure they can also, if they really wanted to, they can get access to your contracts so they can see that kind of stuff. So yeah, usually it's from your employer. They can also maybe tell if you just have a very low taxable income for example, as a PT that normally makes $70,000 a year. If you're a PT and you make like $30,000 a year, maybe that's a little bit of a red flag, and then they look deeper into it. So Mark asks, do the 30 days have to be consecutive that you return to your tax home, or is it throughout the year? This is a question that we asked in the video, and it does not have to be consecutive. And in fact, Joe mentioned that it's better if it's not consecutive, and it makes a lot of sense, his reasoning for that. His reasoning is that if you were truly for example, like a pilot or a government contractor, like I said earlier, if you were truly someone that traveled away from home, you would come home often. And sometimes, I guess we don't think of it that way as travel therapists, but to maintain a tax home, you should probably be coming back there pretty often, more than once a year. So if you're gone for 11 months and then you come back for just 30 days and then you leave again for 11 months, not that you would be ineligible for stipends, but that does not look as good as someone that is coming back for a week every couple months. That just looks more like you're really living there. You're coming back to check the mail, all those things. So it's actually better if it's spaced out. But yeah, the 30-day rule, it just needs to be at least 30 days per year. Do you still pay taxes at the end of the year? Yeah, you still pay tax at the end of the year. As a traveler, you still have withholdings like you would as a normal W-2 employee, and then at the end of the year, you, based on your taxable income and any investment income or interest income that you have, you then you determine your tax liability, and then your withholdings are subtracted from that tax liability. And then if there's an overage, then that's when you get a refund. If there's not, then you pay whatever the difference is. I think that is a common misconception with not only travelers, but just people in general, how taxes work. The withholdings that you're getting throughout the year, you're paying taxes throughout the year. And then at the end, if you get a refund, it's not that you just didn't pay any taxes and that you were given money from the government. It's that you overpaid your taxes and your withholdings throughout the year. And at the end of the year, if you owe taxes, it's not that that's all you owed. You paid in throughout the year, and then that was the difference, if that makes sense. All right, Jeff asks, is there a limit on how long you can work on a travel contract, or a limit to keep extending? Can I keep extending as long as I spend 30 days in my tax home? No, you cannot. So we talked to him about that as well. He said that basically 12 months every 24 months is about the longest that you can spend in any one area without that area becoming your new tax home. So for example, for you, if you say you extend your contract 4 times, you ended up being there 15 months and you had no income earned in any other area, it would basically, to the IRS, it would look like that's your new area that's your new tax home. That's your new area where you earn income. And that's ultimately when they're determining a tax home, is what they look at is, where did you earn the majority of your income throughout the year? So if you're moving constantly every 3 months, then obviously you didn't earn it in one place. Then you qualify for a tax home as long as you're paying rent in your home area. But if you stay in the same place for a long time, then that becomes your new tax home. So you don't want to stay there more than 12 months in any 24-month period. Juliana asks, what is the standard deduction and how do you document this? So the standard deduction, that's tax terminology. That is just, if you itemize your deductions and you looked at each little expense you had, so things like mortgage interest, charitable gifts, all these things, and you itemized all that, you come up with a certain number. So what the IRS does, instead of having everyone itemize all the little things that they did for deductions, they just say, okay, you can either itemize everything, or we'll just give you this standard amount per person. And so last year was $12,000. I think this year it's going to be $12,200. And basically what that standard deduction is, that is just taken off the top of your income. So say you earned $50,000, that $12,000 is basically subtracted out of that $50,000, and then the tax brackets start from that point on. So that first $12,000 or so that you make each year is tax-free from the standard deduction, and then the tax brackets start at basically $12,001 as of last year. So hopefully that makes sense. Thanks for joining, Mike. Good to see you guys in here. So I think that, unless you guys have any more questions, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. Next week, next Sunday, we're doing another live video. I don't know what the topic will be right now. We're just going to be getting back from NSC on Sunday, so we'll see how that works out. Hopefully we'll be back in time and we'll be settled in and we can do a video on something. We'll probably do a recap of NSC. I think that'd be a pretty cool topic. See how things go there. I guess I should, this should have gone in the announcements, but I think I'm going to start doing some interviews every now and then of people either finance related or maybe even travelers, just spread out throughout, maybe once every month or something like that, do an interview. And I have one planned right now. A buddy of mine who just wrote a finance book. I think probably next week sometime I'm going to try to interview him in a live video, talking about how he retired at 41 as a PT and about the book he just wrote. So might start there, and then maybe just look for other people to talk to, just about interesting topics, stuff that interests me. Maybe you guys will be interested as well. Carolyn said, during one of my assignments in 2018, we rented our home to a travel nurse. The way our CPA counted the rental income allowed us to deduct professional expenses. That's probably true. I don't really know a whole lot about how rental income, how deductions would work with rental income, but that might be true. You might be able to write off more if you have, that basically counts as like passive income, I think is how the IRS looks at rentals. So that's definitely different than having W-2 income like you would as just a normal traveler. So you might be able to write off additional expenses there, but I'm not real familiar with that. One more question. Can you work closer than 50 miles if it is in a city? Still requires a long time to travel from home. So we talked to him about that 50-mile rule. We went in depth about that for probably 5 or 10 minutes. In short, 50-mile rule doesn't exist. Basically, you need to be far enough away that it is basically considered a non-commutable distance. And that's going to differ depending on the area. And like you said, in a city, 50 miles is a lot different than rural. Like in rural areas, 50 miles is really not a big deal. People drive that pretty often. So it needs to be a non-commutable distance. And then the other thing is you need to have duplicate expenses. So you said there, still requires a long time to travel from home. If you're just living in your home, your regular tax home, and you're not renting a different place, you're not getting you're not duplicating expenses, then you're not going to be eligible for stipends. You take all that taxed. So pretty much anytime you're commuting from home, then all of your pays can be taxed. Caroline said, I'd love to hear an interview with your friend you mentioned who retired at 41. Yeah, I think it's going to be really good. I think a lot of people will be interested in it. He actually wrote an article for me on the Fifth Wheel PT website a couple years ago, and it's one of my most popular articles. He's a much better writer than I am, and I think his book, it's the Choose FI Blueprint to Financial Independence book. It came out October 1st, and it's a really good book. I would really recommend that to you guys. We gave away 5 copies of that book on our, it was a giveaway we did on Travel Therapy Mentor and on our Instagram. So we'll probably give away more of those books. I really like that book a lot, and I think everyone should check it out. And so I want to talk to him about the book. I want to talk to him about how he retired so early, all those things. So hopefully you guys will be interested in those interviews as well. I don't know if I'll put them on this page or I might put them on the Fifth Wheel PT page, since they're probably going to be more finance related. So if you guys aren't following the Fifth Wheel PT Facebook page, definitely follow that, because since I'm not going to be working probably this next 3 months, I will probably do some more videos on there. So check that out. Check out our Instagram page at Travel Therapy Mentor. If you haven't read any of our travel articles or my finance articles on fifthwheelpt.com and traveltherapymentor.com, there's a lot of good articles there. And after I end this video soon, I'm going to post the link to the full interview with Joe Smith. So you guys watch that. Let me know what you think. You can come back here and ask questions if you want. I'll try to answer them. But thank you guys for watching. Again, if you could like, comment, share this video, the more people see it, the better. And hopefully we can all be more informed travelers. So thanks you guys for watching. See you next Sunday.